So now I have all 4 screws out. I'm going to take this shroud off, but there is 2 lighting cables under here. They are labeled left light and right light. There we go. So once the 2 cables are off, we have the shroud out of the way, and now we have better access to it. So today we're going to go over how to change the motors in a 0-turn 10 scooter. The tools you're going to need is a Phillips screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver. You're going to need a 3/4 socket. You're going to need 2 13mm wrenches or sockets. You're going to need a 7mm wrench or socket and a metric Allen set. So the first thing we're going to do is break our scooter apart. I'm going to lift the seat off. And from here, the battery shrouds will pop out. Going to undo the straps holding the batteries down and then unplug the 2 batteries, set them to the side. From here, we're going to unplug the 2 motor cables and then our main connection in the center. Then we're just going to lift the back from this handle, bring the front forward, and then now we can work on the motors back here. So now that I have this rear piece taken off the scooter, we're going to take off the red shroud. We're going to need our Phillips screwdriver, and there is 4 screws. 2 right here, and then 2 right here that we're going to take out. So now I have all 4 screws out. I'm going to take this shroud off, but there is 2 lighting cables under here. They are labeled left light and right light. There we go. So once the 2 cables are off, we have the shroud out of the way, and now we have better access to our motors. So the next step is we're going to take the tire off. I've got it sitting up on end like this. That way I can work on 1 motor at a time, and it's a lot easier to reach everything. So I'm going to do this tire first. We're going to need a flathead screwdriver, and you're just going to pop this little cap off. From here, we have a 3/4 inch bolt. You can use either an impact drill like I'm going to do, or if you have a socket set, that would work as well. So we're just going to take this bolt out. All right. And the tire should come right off. There we go. Don't lose this little key here. This might fall out, but it does go right there and will be important for mounting the tire back on later. I'm actually going to grab it and set it to the side. So now we're going to take the motor off the frame. It's being held in place to the frame in 3 points right here, here, and here. So these bolts are 13mm. You might be able to get away with 1/2 inch, but I feel 13 fits a little bit better. So what I'm going to do, you can use 2 wrenches, you can use a socket set. I'm going to use this impact drill again just to make this a little bit faster. But we're just going to take these 3 bolts out. And then the last one over here. From here, we should be able to lift the motor out. Just like that. Now, as we can see, the motor cables are actually zip tied to the frame. So I'm going to need a pair of wire cutters. So I'm going to cut this one here. And then this one will just unplug. Looks like all of our cables are free. Now we should be able to just lift the motor right out of the frame. So we've got our 2 motors here. Here's the old motor and here's the new one. I've got them lined up like this just to be sure that they're the correct side. So I have the neutral lever pointing out here, neutral lever pointing out here. And as you can see, the motors have the exact same orientation. This is the correct motor. We just don't want to put in the right-hand motor on the left-hand side because they are different. So next, we actually need to take off the neutral lever from the old motor. This one did not come with it. So all it is a, I've got a 7mm socket set I'm going to use to hold this nut on one side, and then I'm using a 2.5mm Allen key on the other side. Then I'm just going to take these 2 bolts out. So now that I have these screws out, you can see that this jacket is just kind of loose here. So I'm going to take this off first, Then I'm going to grab my Allen set, and this is a 3mm Allen. We're just going to take these 2 screws out. Once you break the seal, it should be pretty easy to get out. I do want to mention that I had a bit of trouble with these, so with the wrench. So what I did is I actually grabbed a socket set, and I didn't show it in the video because I'm showing the instructions, but I did have to take off this jacket to get a socket set in there and crank it loose. You do not want to crank it on this side. It's such a small Allen head, you don't want to strip the screw. If you do strip that screw, you'll be in a little bit of trouble. So I just wanted to mention that that's what happened there. So once you break the seal, you should be able to take these out by hand. There we go, our little handle comes off. And now just to take this jacket off, because we are going to use it on our new motor, is just a Phillips screw, and then there's a little there's a little lock nut on this side, but it's just a Phillips screwdriver. So we'll unscrew it on this side. Then the lock nut might stay in there, it might not. Just try to not lose it. There's one on this side. There we go. So I have that off. I'm going to move this motor out of the way, and we're going to do the same thing. So before I put this back on here, I'm going to do this first, because this is threaded and this will be the more difficult of the pieces to do. So I have our little Allen, and I'm going to try to hand thread it in there first. Let me go ahead and get the second one in. And it does get a little tight. So going back to our 2.5mm Allen, just making sure to put pressure until I feel like I can hand tighten it again. There we go. So I'm going to tighten these all the way in, and then we'll put our lock nut on the other side. So I have the screws all the way in. I'm going to take my little lock nut, and then I'm going to try to hand thread it first. And once it's on here, you can tighten it with a socket set or a wrench. The only reason I used a socket set on the other motor is because this is a used scooter and the bolt was pretty tight. And I did not want to strip it from this side. So now that it's on there, I'm going to use my socket set this time before I put on that jacket. I'm just going to hold it on this side, and we'll tighten these down. So now we're going to put on our little plastic jacket. It only goes on a certain way, so you see how the holes line up. If you go the other direction, it will not line up. So it only goes on one way. We're going to get our 3mm bolts, and you can usually just hand thread it in there to almost all the way down. From there, we can get our 3mm Allen wrench and just tighten them up. And now we go to the other side of our jacket. We have our Phillips screws, and then we have our 2 little lock nuts on the other side. We're going to go underneath the wires. Make sure you're not pinching the wires with this. Then the Phillips screw goes in from the bottom. And then with my finger on the other side, I'm going to hold the lock nut and then just tighten it. And then same thing on the other side. grab the lock nut, kind of hold it in place, and then just tighten it with the Phillips screwdriver. All right, now I have our neutral lever on the new motor. Now we're going to install it into the actual base. So if you order new motors, these are some of the parts you're going to get with it. If you're ordering used motors, you might have to reuse the ones from your previous motor. But these are all the parts we have. We've got these larger washers. There's two different ones, one's with a slit, one without, but a set of 3, 6 rubber stoppers, 3 normal washers. We get 3 bolts, 2 long ones and 1 smaller one. The smaller one will go up top here, furthest away from the motor. These are actually your tire bolts. They'll go on this end here. We have the 3 nuts to these bolts, and we have these little stoppers. So essentially the way it goes is these rubber stoppers go on the outside of this bearing, and this goes in here. There we go. And then as far as the bolts go, you'll have a normal washer on the outside of the bolt. You'll have one of these washers. The ones with the slit will go on the outside of the motor because they rest up like that. And then 1 rubber bearing, if I don't drop it, it goes in there. So it sits in there like that. Then on the other side, we have these that don't have the slit and a rubber stopper. So rubber stopper first. Right here, and then your nut. Now this will be bolted onto the frame, so there will be a frame in between here, but that's how the hardware goes on. So now I'm going to drop the motor in. We have our washer and then our little rubber stopper in here. Now the motor goes just like this. I'm going to insert the bearings. Now remember, the shortest bolt is going to go right here. The 2 longer bolts are going to go on the bottom. There we go. I've got everything lined up. And I'm just going to drop it in. There we go. Now I'm going to try to line up the others. So now that I have that first bolt in, I'm just going to put the lock nut on the other side and just start it. I don't want any of these coming out. There we go. And now I'm going to try to line up the others. So I'm going to stick my bearing in there. And then I'm going to try and get this washer in on the underside. There we go. Start the nut on the bottom. Then for the final side, there we go. And then from here, we're just going to tighten these bolts. Now I've got my 13mm wrench and 13mm drill. I'm just going to tighten these up. I'm just going to double check all the sides now. I want to make sure it's tight. All right, looks pretty good. Now before I put the tire back on, I'm actually going to zip tie this wire back where it was. So it looks like they have it zip tied right in here. Then I'm going to plug my lighting cable back in. So I'm just going to zip tie these 2 right here. So before I put the tire on, I'm actually going to just go ahead and zip tie this wire. It's going to go right here. Then this wire plugs right back in. This is your brake wire. There we go. And this one just stays loose. These are your lights. We will do this again at the end. From here, we can just remove this plastic. There's our new pin. Then I'll grab the old tire. Line it up with that pin. You can see how there's like a little groove in there. Looks like they have a little rubber cap on the end. There we go. Put our socket on. And then we'll just tighten it up with our drill or socket set. There we go. So that's one side done. You're going to do everything I just did to this other side as well. You'll just flip it over and do the opposite. Almost forgot, don't forget your little cap. From here, we're going to put our shroud back on. We want to reconnect our lights. The left light goes to the left, the right goes to the right. Make sure you connect them over this bar here. If you go under, you'll have trouble putting on the shroud again. Left light to the left and right light to the right. They should snap in pretty easily. Make sure both neutral levers are going through here. Then we're going to screw in the shroud with our Phillips screwdriver. So one goes right up front here. And then another on the other side. Then the two screws in the back, just like we did earlier. Now we're going to put our scooter back together. We got our 3 cables here. Just going to lift it, get it where I want it. Just trying to make sure these cables aren't getting caught anywhere. The center one goes right here. We have our left one on the left. And our right goes on the right. From here we put our batteries back in. From here we'll put our batteries back in. With the cables going in the respective and labeled ports. Put this back over, tighten it down. There we go. And now our shroud goes back on. Perfect. Our seat goes back on. There, we are ready to go. And that is how you change motors in a 0-turn 10 scooter by Pride Mobility.
Hi, I'm Mark.
And my name is Alex. We're co-owners of Marc's Mobility.
I started this company in 1995.
We sell many products, not just what you see in this video. If you have any questions or concerns, please call us at the number below at 800-677-6293. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.